Morning, everybody. How you doing? Welcome back to a very wet Surrey this morning. 24 hours of rain. These are all kind of floodplains anyway, and they've taken the brunt of the water. It's quite crazy. The ducks love it though. The ducks love it. There's always a bull market somewhere. Doesn't matter what's happening to someone that's awful, somebody else or something else is enjoying the situation. And today is a good day for the ducks. Look guys, football is back. Football is back. After the international break, we're back to Premier League football. Lots of games this week, or weekend, and this week. Tottenham don't get to show their reaction to what's been happening at White Hart Lane until Monday night against a very defensively solid and resolute Sean Dyche's Everton. It's going to be a frustrating and stubborn affair that could go either way, I think, depending on what version of Tottenham turns up and depending on how fine-tuned Everton will be under Dyche. I think people, always give him a lot of credit for the way that he sets up, but, ultimately Tottenham are a better team, and Tottenham should, with the talent that we have, be able to get a result. However, our away form this season has deserted us, and we just don't know what's going to be on show and how the players are going to respond. One thing I would say is that there might just be, I'm not going to call it a new manager bounce, maybe like a sacked manager bounce. We'll see how those players really feel if given chances. And the other variable, of course, is this is the first time we're going to see Stellini ball and Mason ball that doesn't have any tactical shackles placed around it because of Antonio Conte's wishes. We might see an entirely different version of Tottenham. Might see a new formation. I doubt it, but we just don't know. Every time Stellini's taken in charge of Tottenham this season, previous to this, because of the medical absence, he's still been working with Antonio Conte's instructions. So we shall see, guys. We shall see. Stellini himself, guys, has said there is no crisis at Tottenham, and that when you take the best decisions for the club, that there can't be any crisis. And I like where he's going with it. I think it's political speech, a bit of kind of PR, which is fine. But I do think that there's a slight element of truth to it. And here's where I'm going to go with it, right? So bear with me, because I'm just always like to give you both sides of the argument. There's one very popular side of the argument right now, which is that Tottenham are in meltdown. No manager, no female team manager, no director of football, no security over Harry Kane's contract, no clear path, and everything looks very opaque. And I completely understand anyone that's latching onto that. The other angle, of course, is that 10 days ago, or 2 weeks ago, rather, the Southampton game finished 3-3 with a last-minute, absolutely shocking refereeing decision with an equally shocking VAR decision to not overturn it. If that doesn't happen, Conte doesn't say what he says, and we come out of the international break in third place in the hardest league in the world, with the league being the best barometer of where a football club is relative to its peers, because it takes away as much of the variance that exists in cup competitions. And so on one hand, you could say, well, Conte wasn't doing, a bad job, but actually I'm going to say the majority of Tottenham fans, I don't know the specifics of what percentage were Conte in or Conte out, but I think a lot of fans, a very, very significant percentage of Tottenham fans, had enough of Antonio Conte. They were fed up with the football, very frustrated with another season of unnecessary exits from cup competitions where the variance had never been more favourable. And a manager that always came across as someone who at least to me, in press conferences, felt like he was doing us a favour. He was better than us, and then went and used language which, whilst, you know, can be interpreted in many different ways, ultimately the board decided was a step too far in lack of accountability and throwing your own players under the bus. So Antonio Conte was removed from his duties, which was exactly what half of the fan base wanted. But now that he's gone, there's no more Conte to blame. And there is obviously, you can see it, a significant shift and a swagger from Conte out to now Levy out, after Conte was removed by the person who these fans previously didn't necessarily have an issue, or too much of an issue, with Daniel Levy for. Which I find odd. You know, it's almost like you need someone to hate, and if the first rock starts to fall, then we need to now pivot and move to somewhere else. I understand that there's another variable to come into mix into the equation, which is Paratici. And look, on that particular note, I stand by what I said, that I'm not entirely sure what Daniel Levy could do any differently. There's an article in The Athletic saying that they have sources saying that Daniel Levy was warned against Paratici and that he decided to go against it anyway, and that he should have known about the investigation. And look, I'm not an expert in Italian law, but you know, I've done a series of videos on Juve and their troubles, and for sure, if it's true what Paratici has been accused of and found guilty of, then he's a very dodgy guy. But the appeal process is still in play. FIFA, in my opinion, were wrong to extend the ban globally until they know the result of the appeal. And if the appeal is upheld, then FIFA are in the mud, and Daniel Levy will no doubt litigate accordingly. But the idea that he was to know about the situation before he signed, I'm not sure the dates add up on it. I could be wrong, but he was appointed as director of football at Tottenham in July of 2021. It wasn't until November of 2021 when the news first broke that Paratici and other Juventus directors were under investigation. And this was an investigation from, you know, federal prosecutors. And so I don't think that they, would be able to conduct an investigation in private, because they needed access to the books and to figure out what was going on. And the second that they go and raid the offices of Juventus, then it becomes public knowledge. So I'm not sure that there could have been more than 6 months difference between the investigation happening and it becoming public. It doesn't make sense to me. So I'm not entirely sure I believe The Athletic just because they say that's the case. Second of all, to, I think, back up the argument a little bit stronger, I think we all know that the risk appetite of Daniel Levy is, generally speaking, unsuitable for a football chairman. Now, I know that he might be someone who takes his own mind and is happy to dismiss advice, etc. So I'm not denying that the situation is implausible. But I would say that Daniel Levy hates bad PR, and it doesn't strike me as the sort of guy that would be told by someone, Fabio Paratici is dodgy as hell, he's being investigated for fraud against the football club that employed him, and that you should steer clear. And then Daniel Levy says, thanks for the advice, but I'm going to go with my gut on this one. Because he'd be putting, his own reputation at risk, plus the books of Tottenham Hotspur, which ultimately he owns. This doesn't make any sense to me. I'm not saying I'm wrong. I'm not saying I'm right and that everyone else is wrong. I don't know, but let me know whether or not you think that this idea that Daniel Levy should have known is, or did know, and decided to take the chance anyway. Does that really add up to the Daniel Levy that we know? I don't think so. And so on that basis, he's employed someone, found out what's going on, spoken to Paratici. Paratici said, I'm innocent. He gets found guilty, but the due process hasn't finished. There's an appeals process. And even if it's held up technically at the time, the impact would only be in Italian football, plus all of the work that Paratici's been doing over the last 2.5 years, not just in terms of talent acquisition, but in terms of reorganising the scout structure and everything else. I'm not entirely convinced that Daniel Levy has done anything differently than what he could otherwise have done. If he sacks Paratici because of being, having alleged crimes, and they turn out not to be true, he gets sued and litigated against for wrongful dismissal. I don't think you can do that. Like Arsenal can't sack Thomas Partey because of allegations. So, I don't know. I think the better outcome and the correct outcome should have been Paratici falling on his sword, much like the Juventus directors did. And on that basis, that's where I allocate the criticism, more so on Daniel Levy. But you know what? The buck stops at the top, and by hook or by crook, people are pivoting their anger in that direction now because of the consequence of it all happening, like a kind of perfect storm of crises that are all emerging at the same time. And he is the captain of the ship. So I understand that argument. But when you break down the stories in isolation, I think there is, more than just a little different take that you can throw at it. And that's not me trying to defend him for any other purpose than I just think, let's just discuss both sides of the conversation. Anyway, so that's that. Last bit of news I've seen today is that Daniel Levy has said, or not, he hasn't said, but according to a couple of articles that are popping around, that Manchester United have suffered a blow in their pursuit of Harry Kane because, allegedly, Daniel Levy made up his mind to never deal with Manchester clubs again following the regretful decision to sell Kyle Walker in 2017, and that he will not deal with any club in Manchester. Not entirely sure if there's any truth or veracity to that. It might just be clickbait, but I thought I'd drop it because he said, the article goes on to say, that will be a boon to the chances of Thomas Tuchel's new Bayern Munich. Thomas Tuchel would love to work with Harry Kane, and Harry Kane surely would go on and win a trophy in Germany. But does Harry Kane want to leave England and sacrifice the Premier League record? No, probably not. So if there's any truth to that story, then he probably would turn down any move to Bayern Munich and then just run down the contract and leave for free and go to Manchester anyway in the summer of next year. Who knows? Me personally, I think that the argument that you have to win a trophy, a team trophy, in order to cement your legacy, I think it's an argument that's constructed by the media. And when you actually break down the mechanics of the logic behind it, it doesn't really add up. If Harry Kane cannot win a trophy at Tottenham, but can win a trophy at Manchester United, then he's not going to become a 5 times better player just by moving. What is going to change is the players that he has around him. And I don't think any individual's legacy has to be or should be cemented by the variance in the people that you're playing with. Harry Kane could have lifted a trophy in the European finals against Italy. The game went to penalties. He scored his penalty Saka missed his, Jordan Pickford didn't save anything, we end up losing that penalty shootout. Harry Kane still remains on 0 team trophies. He did his job. Other people not doing theirs impacted and influenced whether Harry Kane is finally going to lift the trophy. The same can be said if he goes to Manchester United and the only reason that he wins a trophy is because he's playing with better players around him. That to me is a bonkers logic to say that you can never be thought of or considered one of the greatest unless you have a team trophy behind your name. For sure it helps, and for sure as an individual you should crave that stuff. But just because all the best players in the world have played for the best teams and have won all the trophies does not mean that a player that hasn't and that has shown loyalty should be punished in terms of legacy for not winning a trophy that has been directly influenced and impacted by other people. Let me know your thoughts, guys. Like, share and subscribe, and as always, bye-bye.